Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Can everyone hear me? If you can't hear me, you don't know what I just asked. Okay, good. Great. Hi. Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for this incredibly warm welcome, and I feel it on so many levels. I feel welcome. First of all, you guys are just unbelievably nice and welcoming. From Rabbi Ethan, Rabbi Lily, to my wonderful hosts, Janet and Dan, to everybody I have come across. You're just friendly, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate it because I am a native Pennsylvanian, and as I said last night, I feel Pennsylvania in the air, so I feel like the air is welcoming me. And also, I'm in my happy place. My happy place is learning Torah, and this is a congregation where learning is at the core of what you are. I saw it in the most amazing way last night. I saw it here this morning in Shul. Not just a frontal sermon, but the rabbi has you interacting and learning, and it's just a beautiful thing to behold. Anyway, so thank you for welcoming me, and now let's get to work. And that was the good news portion of what I'm going to talk about today. These are very, very difficult days for the Jewish people. I think that's a fair understatement. And it was hard for me, with the short amount of time that I have here this morning, to just pick one problem to talk about. But sometimes we get a little help from our enemies, and in this case, my answer came from the departed but not at all missed Hanan Nasrallah, leader of Hezbollah, who I now hope and assume is basking in the hot flames of the netherworld. Shortly before October 7th, 2023, he told us what our biggest problem was. Here's a quote from Hanan Nasrallah. He said, "We are hearing from the Zionist entity a fear of a civil war, bloodshed, and nearing the point of explosion. When they speak of the collapse of the Zionist entity, they are talking about a limit of 80 years. The state will not survive more than that." All right, he said this in year 76. And he was so confident. We were at each other's throats there. And prior to October 7th, 2023, we were reaching unprecedented levels of internal discord. And he basically was rejoicing in this. He was saying, these Zionists are doing our work for us. We don't have to work so hard because they're just going to destroy themselves from within. And others of our leaders paid attention to this as well. As we're discovering more and more about what the thinking with our enemies to the south, the evil Hamas were thinking, they were also noting this is a time that Israel is particularly weak. This is a good, opportune time to strike them. And then came October 7th, and we did what people do when they're in big trouble. We pulled together in the most magnificent ways. And we'll talk about that. But where we are now, almost a year and a half in, is that we, I guess to some level, have gotten used to things, which is outrageous in its own sense, but we're still, even though we're still very much in the ripples of that, the passage of time seems to have given us license to some extent to return to our very divisive ways. And here's a warning that I think we are still very much in need of. Our former president of Israel, Ruby Rivlin, some time ago said, "Victory in the battle between us means losing the war of existence. It's a greater threat than nuclear bombs or terrorism, greater than the enemies who seek our destruction. The threat of internal division will always be the greatest threat of all." Right? They understand it. We should understand it. And in the short time that we have here this morning, I want to address the problem, the question that looms over all of it, which is, well, what's wrong with us, right? We know how destructive this is. Why is it so hard for us to get along? Okay, so as I said, my go-to text is the Bible, so let's go there to see if we can get some insight on what the problem is. And here I hope everyone has access to this source sheet. We're going to get to that in a minute. It's hard not to notice that the very first family that we are introduced to in the Hebrew Bible is a nuclear family, and I would say it's nuclear in two respects, right? It's comprised of a father and a mother and two kids, and it is internally implosive. Two children, and one of them ends up killing the other one. And the theme of sibling strife continues throughout the book of Bereshit, right? The two bookends, think about it. It starts with Cain and Abel and a fratricide, and it ends with Joseph and his brothers, and a near fratricide, right? For technical reasons, they don't succeed, but it's not because they didn't try. And in between, we've got several other stories of sibling strife, Jacob and Esav, and Yitzchak and Yishmael. This is a very, very central theme throughout the book of Bereshit. So why? Why does the Torah start with this theme and hit on it so heavily? And I think maybe for one simpler reason is that to make the point that if you trace us all back far enough, we're all siblings. But I think there's something a little more subtle going on here. We've got a kind of warning by the biblical text telling us this relationship, the sibling relationship, is particularly fraught. And these stories are warning us that this is the relationship we need to look out for. And I want to take that term sibling and kind of expand on it into a more figurative way. We are all siblings in so many real ways. This close relationship is the one that we have to be the most concerned about. So what is it that's so fraught about it? I want to suggest two things. I think the stories in Bereshit point to two great dangers that are inherent in this relationship, which are relevant to today. The first is the breakdown of communications. Siblings seem to have a really hard time communicating with each other, and when they do, violence often ensues. So we're going to look at two examples from the two bookends. First, from the story of Cain and Abel at the beginning of Bereshit, and then from the story of Joseph and his brothers at the end, okay? So let's look at source number one. We all know the story, Cain and Abel, two children. Cain starts off his story in a kind of neutral way. He seems to be a half-decent guy. He has an idea to bring an offering. His brother says, what a great idea. I think I'll do that too, but I'll do it better. Cain is murderously angry and ends up killing his brother. Right? We know that Cain here is the culprit. Is Hevel completely innocent in this story? What did you think? Anybody? Complete victim? No? Okay, keep in mind that whatever you say will tell me what position you are in your family. Yeah, go ahead. Why is he not completely innocent? Okay, well, one might say that is a sign of what? Why is that negative? Yeah, that he's copying his brother. Is that a negative thing, copying his brother? Why might he be copying his brother? Imitation is the highest form of compliment, right? Right? A younger sibling says, oh, wow, I admire you so much, I want to be just like you. Or, firstborns, anyone? Or, what is that second sibling trying to do? One up you, take over, right? Outdo you, put you down. And again, the text isn't clear about, doesn't give us a definitive read on it. Just one tiny little thing. There's a rabbinic dictum that says you can't compare reading a biblical text 100 times to reading it 101 times. The 101st time I read this thing, I noticed that one of the adjectives that's used for the offering that Hevel brings is the word mi bechorot tzono. He brings the first of his flocks. I'm thinking, hey, that's not such a neutral term, to bring the bechor, the firstborn. In fact, throughout the book of Bereshit, that's going to be the contentious issue. Who gets to be the bechor? Is he passing a not-so-subtle message with this offering and with doing it better than my brother? I really have my eye on his role as the bechor. I don't know, but my point is that in sibling rivalry, in sibling tensions, it is almost never a zero-sum game where one is completely right and the other is completely wrong. In any case, Cain is going to end up killing Hevel, and that is completely wrong. Let's look at the very strange account of the murder, which I have printed for you in source number 1. Tell me, please, what is wrong with this verse? Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv. Cain said to Hevel, his brother, Vayihi beyotam basadeh, and when they were in the field, Vayakom Cain el Hevel achiv vayahargehu. Cain arose over Hevel, his brother, and killed him. Anything wrong here? Yeah. What did he say? Okay, our assumption is if we have A said to be, comma, quote, we expect words in the quote. But instead what we get is Cain said to Abel, comma, quote, blank. And now we shift scenes to the field and he kills him. So everybody wants to know, what did he say, right? And here, I didn't print this for you on your page, but I want to read you 3 scenarios, 3 possibilities that are suggested by the Midrash. And this is where the Midrash lives and breathes. There's a great, wonderful gap in the text. Let's try to fill it with what might have happened. So here are 3 scenarios suggested. Number 1, the question that the Midrash keeps asking is, what were they arguing about? Okay, what were they arguing about? They said, "Come, let us divide the world. One took the land and the other took the movable objects. One said, 'The land you are standing on is mine.' The other said, 'Oh yeah? Well, what you're wearing is mine.' One said, 'Take it off.' The other said, 'Get off.' As a result, Cain arose over Abel, his brother, and killed him." That's scenario number 1. What are they arguing about? Land and stuff. Second opinion, what were they arguing about? One said, "In my portion will the holy temple be built." The other said, "In my portion will the holy temple be built." As a result, Cain arose over Abel, his brother, and killed him. Scenario number 3, trigger alert, this is disgusting, but here it comes. Rabbi Yehuda bar Ami said they were arguing about Chava, the mother. Basic arithmetic, 4 people in the world, 3 men, 1 woman, who gets mom, right? I did warn you. In any case, the first time I studied this midrash, I had the great zechut of learning it with my teacher of blessed memory, Nechama Leibovitz, and she challenged us to abstract, what is this midrash trying to say to us? What are the 3, basically this is the first murder that we have in recorded biblical history. It's the first war, if you will. The Midrash is asking, why do people keep doing this? Why do they hurt each other? Why do they kill each other? Why do they fight wars? And it breaks it down into 3 scenarios. What do people fight about? Land, stuff. What's number 2? Number 2, the Beit HaMikdash, the holy religion. And the third, sex, land, religion, sex, right? Pick a war, any war. Does it not fall into one of those categories, right? That's what the Midrash is doing. But Rashi is having none of it. And if you look at source number 2 on your page, Rashi says, I know, I read those Midrashim too, but none of them address the plain sense of this text. What does he say? He engaged in contentious words with him to create a pretext to kill him. What is Rashi doing here? What is he finding problematic about all 3 Midrashim? They're asking the wrong question, says Rashi. The question that the Midrash asks again and again is, what were they arguing about? Why is that the wrong question? What does the verse say? Yeah.
The verse simply says, "And Cain said to Abel, his brother." It's a one-way conversation. It's not a conversation, it's a word.
100%.
And actually, I recall Robert Alter in his commentary talked about how some of the very old translations go along with Rashi, basically said, Cain said to Abel, "Go to the field." And basically said he was just directing him so that he could create a
Okay, so go to the field would be one possibility, but I want to take the first part of what you said, which is, even though I always love hearing Robert Alter quoted in any context, but yes, he's looking at this verse, and the verse does not say Cain and Abel spoke to each other, or they said. The verse is very clear. Vayomer Cain el hevel achiv. One brother's talking, the other brother isn't. Cain said to Abel, his brother. And I think what Rashi is doing in a very, very brilliant way is he's saying, actually, the words themselves don't matter. He doesn't give us the content. He says these words are not really words. The words are pretexts. Right? Cain is using contentious words to whip up the atmosphere only so that he can end up killing his brother. He's basically weaponizing words, using them as weapons in order to kill his brother. And that, perhaps, I would like to argue, and I think maybe Rashi's hinting at this, that if the Midrash is talking about 3 basic causes of killing, this is a cause that perhaps underlines all others, is that when people, whatever arguments, whatever problems they have, when the ability to have a 2-way conversation stops, when words are weaponized to the point of not being used for any form of communication, that's when the red flags fly, and that's when violence is very, very likely to ensue. Vayomer Cain el hevel achiv. I want to fast forward now to the story of Joseph and his brothers in source number 3. And what we see here, and we're doing this really in very brief form, there's so much more to do here, but just at the most basic level, I would argue that in this story, Joseph is playing, he's got a little bit of Hevel in him and a little bit of Cain in him. He's like Hevel, and that's the obvious comparison to make. Why is he like Hevel? He's what? He's the recipient, he's the victim, he's the younger one, he's the more favored one. But he's got a little bit of Cain in him too, in that he is using his words also in a kind of weaponized way, in a very destructive way. He is his father's favorite, but that doesn't seem to be enough for him. He needs to press his advantage by whispering evil reports into their father's ear. In source number 3, Vayaveh Yosef et dibatam ra'a el avihem. He brings evil words, evil reports to their father, pressing his advantage through this misuse, this power-driven use of words, talking not at his brother like Cain, but talking about his brothers to the father. Again, there's no two-way. There's no conversation. It's talking, but to destroy, to break down. And the response of the brothers, I think, is actually very appropriate. In source number 3, how do they respond? Vayisneu oto, they hated him. Velo yachelu dabero l'shalom. They can't speak peacefully to him. Basically, what are they saying? You're going to use your speech in this destructive, power-driven way. We're going to withhold our speech entirely from you. We're going to stop talking to you. And so we've got this, again, the book of Bereshit begins and ends with this terrible breakdown of the ability of siblings to talk to each other. And what happens here, as we saw in the story of Cain and Hevel, once this happens, the red flags are out, and violence is the next course of action. And we see then that the brothers try to kill Joseph, but they don't manage to do it. All right, so we've got these two stories that essentially get us to this problem of communication. And I want to say that the book of Bereshit hints at something else here. I don't know if you noticed, but in the story of Cain and Hevel, there's a tiny little word that keeps on repeating seemingly unnecessarily. Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv. Vayakom Cain el Hevel achiv. His brother, his brother, his brother. The word ach, brother, appears in that story. The story is 9 verses long, but the word ach appears 7 times in those 9 verses. Basically making the case that this is our problem. There's something in the siblinghood itself that is inherently problematic. So what is it? What is it about this relationship that's so hard? And here I want to indulge, with your indulgence, in a small rant that is related to the moment that we are in right now. I want to start with the sibling relationship with the caveat that, of course, the sibling relationship can be the deepest, most enduring, wonderful relationship that we have, but it can also be the most challenging, right? Our siblings are the people who are the closest to us. They've known us forever, but sometimes that closeness can be just a little too close for comfort. They've known us since we were kids. They know all our secrets. We've worked so hard through life to build a certain persona, and they look at us and say, yeah, I know what's under there, right? Here are just a gathering from some 20th century writers on the question of siblings. Here's one. We know one another's faults, virtues, catastrophes, mortifications, triumphs, rivalries, desires, and how long we can each hang by our hands to a bar. We have been banded together under pack codes and tribal laws. Our siblings push buttons that cast us in roles we felt sure we had let go of long ago. The baby, the peacekeeper, the caretaker, the avoider. It doesn't seem to matter how much time has elapsed or how far we have traveled. Right? So they're this close, too close for comfort, but paradoxically, we can also feel like they're too close, but they're also not quite close enough. We have sometimes this kind of irrational expectation that they should adopt our precise positions, priorities, values, and if they don't, it could feel like a judgment or even a betrayal. And here's another writer who says, our siblings, they resemble us just enough to make all their differences confusing, at times infuriating, and even threatening. Okay, so basically with siblings, you can't win. I'm sorry, it must be the brother. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Anyway, okay, so if we zoom out and we look at the world stage, I would argue that most conflicts in the world are extensions of this sibling conundrum, right? Those who are close, sometimes too close, but not quite close enough, right? In the political sphere, think about wars between countries. It's usually countries that are neighbors, right, that share a tremendous amount, often share a border, sometimes live within the same border. Sometimes if we would create a Venn diagram of some of these countries, we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. They're 90% identical and maybe 10% different, but all they see is that 10% difference. That's the sibling problem. That's all they hyper-focus on, and sometimes that 10% can be the difference between living in peace and slaughter. I think about the terrible genocide, an actual genocide in the 1990s in Rwanda between the Hutus and the Tutsis. These are two groups of people that speak the Bantu language. They speak the same dialect of the Bantu language, and anybody looking from the outside would probably have a hard time seeing the difference, but those small differences were enough for the Hutus to have a pretext to kill over 1 million Tutsis, right? You have to die because you're supposed to be 100% like me. Right? In the religious sphere, of course, we see this every day. Anybody 1 centimeter to the right of me is a fanatic. 1 centimeter to the left of me, a heretic. Come on, you know this, right? Obviously, like this is the space. Right here, if you're close to me, you have to be me, right? That's our outrageous expectation. Okay. We just met, but because this is such a friendly crowd, I'm going to tell you a personal story that happened to me more than 5 times. This is my own challenge and my experience of this sibling conundrum. I travel a lot. I'm a patriot. I fly in the national carrier El Al. Even at the moment, even though they're not treating me so well with the prices, but I hope that'll change. In any case, the following scenario has happened to me at least 5 times, where I'm standing in line, and the earnest young security, usually a young woman, is waiting to ask me a bunch of questions, and she looks at me, and then she looks at the gentleman standing a few steps behind me who's next in line, and invariably this is a chassid in full chassidic garb, and she looks at me, and she looks at him, and she says, "Atem biyachad? Are you together?" Right? And I don't know if I say it more quickly, faster or more furiously, or he does, but we both say, no way are we together. What are you? And I'm thinking, has this woman lost her mind? Do I look anything at all like this guy? How could she think we're together? And then all of a sudden, after the 3rd time, I said, what is she? Actually, she's looking, and she's saying, well, yeah, they do look the same. These are 2 people, Jews with the shmatas on their head and a certain age, coming from the land of the Jews. Yeah, they look the same. Right? Okay. Now, I have taken it upon myself that next time this happens, and I know it will, next time she says, Atem biyachad, I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to say, yes, in a very deep and profound way. We have so much more in common than what separates us. Yes. Now, I don't know what this guy is going to do, but that's his work. I'm going to leave that to him. I can't do everything, right? In any case, to get back to today's situation, as our enemies noted before October 7th, we were so busy battling each other, screaming about our differences, and we were overlooking our common ground. Like Joseph, we were so busy talking about each other in these carefully constructed, carefully curated echo chambers, where we let in only the people who were thinking the things that we already thought, dismissing, talking about, maybe even mocking anybody else. Like Cain, we were busy talking at each other, right? Often in these kind of one-sided, weaponized shouting sessions. But then came October 7th, and suddenly we remembered, right? We looked at our Venn diagram again, and we said, we are actually siblings in the best sense of the word. And in the aftermath of our tragedy, we did what families do. We held each other tightly. We showed up for each other in ways that were the most genuine, the most expansive, both within Israel and between the diaspora and Israel. It was a beautiful thing to behold. And this brings us back. I want to just do one more piece of text with you. The reconciliation scene between the siblings. We actually get one in the book of Bereshit, and that is in the last source on your page. After 13 long chapters, the story of Joseph just schleps along for a very long time. We're at the edge of our seats until finally the big reveal, where the viceroy of Egypt finally reveals his true identity. He's Joseph. And knowing his tendency to crave power, to lord it over his brothers, we might have expected him to press his advantage now more than ever. Even in his dreams of grandeur, he never imagined that he would be this big. And look what happens. Instead, what he does, he looks at his brothers and he sees their genuine, desperate need, their vulnerability. He sees how much they've been beaten down by life's events. And I want to say, what I see in this text is that he's overrun by fraternal feelings, which lead him to open his mouth and speak in an entirely new way. This is the language of a caring, loving sibling. Source number 4. Vayomer Yosef el Echav, Gishuna Elai, come close to me. Vayigashu, Vayomer ani Yosef, and you would think that he would blame them. He says, no, you didn't do it. Va'ata lo atem shalachtem oti hena ki Elohim. This was all part of God's plan. And then he says, I want you to stay here in Eretz Goshen, be close to me, and I'm going to sustain you. Basically, what he's saying is, I want to use my power, I want to use my words to bring you close, not to send you away from me. I want to make sure that I use my power over you, not to put you down, but actually to be responsible for you, to make sure that you succeed along with me. This is a whole new sibling conversation. And I think when the brothers hear this, we have what could have been considered one of the greatest anticlimaxes of all time, but I think is actually the climax that we've been waiting for, not just in the book of the story of Joseph, but in the book of Bereshit as a whole. The last source, we have this outpouring of affection, of emotion that we've been waiting for. Vayipol al tzavre binyamin, they fall, they cry, they hugging and kissing, and then va'acharechen dibru echav ito. And afterwards, his brothers talked to him. Now, this seems to be almost absurd to tack that on. They're hugging and kissing and crying and falling, and they talk to him. But I think what we have here, finally, that speech that they had withheld from him at the very beginning of their narrative because of the way that he was talking about them, now when they see that he is using that for peace, for actual conversation, they finally restore that peace. At this point, acharechen dibru echav, they speak to him, and for the first time, we don't have talking at, we don't have talking about, we have talking ito, with him. We have the beginning of an actual two-way dialogue at the end of the book of Bereshit. So that, I think what we have here at the end of the book of Bereshit is a little bit of hope. We've got an optimistic little signal that dialogue is actually possible, that sometimes we don't have to fall into the red flag followed by violence. We can actually begin that conversation and do it in a constructive way. And again, after October 7th, we experienced this remarkable sibling reconciliation after all of the terrible experiences, the shattered, traumatized country that we were. We instantly shifted our perspective. We were better able to assess our own Venn diagram, focusing much less on all those little differences, but focusing really on what unites us. We were suddenly able to set aside all the ideologies, all our personal sensitivities and agendas, and we just let our hearts and our kishkas take over. And we were reminded that in the deepest way, we are family. But alas, the magical moment was short-lived, and even though our crisis is far from ended, our bitter divisions are back, and I want to make sure these are real issues, and some of them have life and death repercussions to them. But the problem is we have to find a way to deal with them that isn't set off by a crisis. Crisis management can't be our strategy. Right? So in the spirit of the book of Bereshit, I want to end this on a hopeful note because people keep telling me you can't talk and leave people down in the dumps where you are. So let me offer you two hopeful thoughts. Okay, hopeful thought number one. we know how to argue constructively. We invented the machloket culture, right? Of the culture of robust, respectful, direct debate. In fact, if you look at our primary texts, you will see 2 lines of the text surrounded by 100 lines of argument across the generations, right? All this very, very direct and tough argument, but right, we don't spare the words, but we say the words, and they're accepted, and we engage, and we learn, and we grow from it. And I want to just mention, as a great example of how this is being manifest in Israel, I mentioned last night that a tragedy that hit my own family circle. My beautiful niece Rachel Goldberg, I don't know if that name, Rachel Sharansky, she did a thing with the 3 Rachels. Did anybody hear that? Anyway, in any case, she's my niece, and her husband, Avi Goldberg, Zichrono Livracha, was killed about 4 months ago in Lebanon. He's an outstanding educator, husband, father of 8. And together, during his too short life, Avi and Rachel, total partnership, they facilitated weekly conversations in their apartment, inviting Israelis from across the political spectrum to sit in their living room and have direct, sometimes very contentious, but very true conversations where people were actually able to engage in the real conversations. And when he was killed, first of all, they gave it a very biblical name, Anashim Achim Anachnu, which is taken from Abraham and Lot. We are siblings, basically. They're saying, yeah, we can't get along, but we're siblings, but let's talk anyway. And after he was killed, in the same spirit, during the Shiva for Avi, Rachel insisted that, even while she was devastated by grief, she said that when members of the Knesset would come to the Shiva, she would not allow them in unless each member came with a member of the opposition party. They had to come in pairs. And I spent a lot of time in this Shiva, and I overheard these members of parliament talking between themselves and saying things like, when will we ever have an opportunity? They were so grateful for the opportunity to do that. And I think, right, there are other such efforts that are out there. I think people understand that this is where we need to go. By the way, he just walked out, but I want to give a shout out to your rabbi. I understand that here in this congregation, it's very unusual that you actually have these kinds of conversations where people have political differences, but you're able to engage with one another. And I think there's hope in all of that. And hopeful thought number 2 lies in that tiny little word that is very persistent, and that is the little word ach, meaning sibling, right? Following our great national nightmare on October 7th, we were able to tap into that basic truth that we are irreversibly, non-negotiably brothers and sisters. And even though, right, so much has happened, and we lost the feeling along the way, I think certainly in recent weeks, it's come back with the return of some of these hostages through the celebrating those who returned and who, after a very long process, we hope will be okay. We were crushed as one with the return of those who were killed in Hamas captivity. Certainly, chief at the top of that list was the Bibas family. Everyone felt this is us. This is our skin. This is our flesh and bones. We felt viscerally connected both to those families and to each other throughout that all. Anyway, my fervent hope, and I'll leave you with this, is that when this time of crisis passes, and I hope to God that it will pass soon, the avalanche of problems that we've put on hold are going to return, that we're going to find a way to hold on to that feeling that at the core we are family. And let's face it, as in the best of families, we're never going to stop disagreeing with each other. We're never going to stop being annoyed by one another, and that is entirely okay, as long as we keep the conversation going, and as long as underneath it all, we remain in the deepest and most enduring ways truly biyachad. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.